Hello, everyone. Welcome to day two of the Sparkability Virtual Summit. I'm Patch Dulay, the founder and CEO of the Spark Project, and I'm back as your host and moderator for today. I hope everybody learned a lot from our speakers in day one. Miss Chitwan, as she talked about going back to the drawing board, going back to basics, but still innovating in the new normal. Coach Kitty, as she talked about how we can transition and start creating new beginnings during this time. And Joy, as she shared with us how we can use the design thinking process to seek and seize new solutions and business ideas for our creative conscious enterprises. To kick off our second day, we have an awesome speaker with years of marketing experience under his belt. His name is Gino Borromeo, who now looks after the growth strategy of SM Supermalls while helping guide the development of new malls and expansion projects. He also oversees marketing for the group's premier malls. But more than being a seasoned marketing professional, Gino has a heart for social enterprises. He is a mentor for Make Sense Philippines, helping early stage social enterprises start up. Before joining SM Supermalls, Gino was the Chief Strategy Officer at McCann World Group Philippines, the country's largest marketing communications agency. At McCann Philippines, he led cross-functional teams of 15 strategists covering expertise in brand strategy, social media, healthcare, e-commerce, digital media, and data analytics. A strategist by training, Gino brings 20 years of hands-on strategy experience for brands at the local, regional, and global levels. So before we start our session, I just want to let everyone know again that we will have some time for your questions later. So if you have any questions or you want to share some insights, you may do so by leaving a comment on our discussion box below, and we'll get to that later. So with that, let's all welcome my marketing idol, brilliant mind, Gino Borromeo. Hi, Gino.
Hi, Patch. Good
Hey,
morning.
Gino, thank you for joining us today. I know you're a busy guy, especially now that the malls are now open. Thank you for spending some time with us and sharing, whatever you want to share and what your experiences in marketing and all other things with our attendees for this summit. So
Thank you for having me. The least I can do.
Thank you so much. So take the floor. Floor is all yours.
All right.
Ready to listen and learn.
Great. Hi, everyone. Good morning. I hope everybody's healthy and well and safe at home. So today, what I'll be talking about is marketing your products in the COVID economy. Let me just share my screen. All right. So I'll be talking about how do you market in a COVID-19 economy. Just to start, maybe just to set off the tone, I'd like to introduce myself quickly so you understand the perspective I'm taking today with what I'm sharing. So my name is Gino, and I've been lucky enough to see business from three very interesting and very different perspectives. So my day job is with SM Supermalls, and here I look after strategy and marketing for the premier malls. So there I get to see the world of big business and the broader retail landscape. In my personal time, I mentor early stage social entrepreneurs through Make Sense Philippines. So I have that unique view of the social enterprise world. And finally, on my own, I've recently started my own little enterprise called the Second Opinion Company. So this is something I do with my wife. And what we try to do is we try to help SMEs, we advise them and help them navigate a new world with respect to brands and marketing. So what I'm going to be sharing with you today is inspired by all the things that I've seen and experienced between these three different worlds. And it's quite an interesting time actually for marketers. So just to set the tone, I'd like to share three pictures that I think illustrate what's happening right now in the world in the context of COVID-19. So you might have seen some of these pictures. Just have a look just to get a feel of what's happening. Okay, this first photo is vegetables being disposed from a truck that came from Benguet. So because the roads got tied up by checkpoints in the early weeks of quarantine, a lot of farmers had to do this. So this was a common story. The next photo is a soldier who came home after duty, and it was his birthday. So his daughter wanted to greet him and give him a cake, but you'll notice that the daughter is wrapped up in plastic as an improvised PPE. This was the only way that they could see each other and at least have a face-to-face moment. Finally, in the news, a few days ago, this piece of news came out. So unfortunately, Okada Manila is going to lay off 1,000 workers, and this is related to the stoppage of the economy because of COVID-19. So I'm sharing these pictures with all of you, not so much to scare you or to depress you, but just to give you a quick feel of how can you be useful? Instead of marketing, how can you be uplifting? And this is a mission. This mission to be helpful, to be useful, to be uplifting is something that should inform your products and your services, what you choose to bring out to the world. It's also something that informs how I think you should promote them to people, because the situation and the context is quite different. Just to share a story, a friend of mine was ranting a couple of days ago that his neighbor, who's a financial advisor, had to make some money and was just relentless in promoting, in quotes, a secure financial future. And of course, my friend was very livid because he was wondering, how can you even promise that in a time like this? Nobody knows what the future will look like. So it's one story, but it just tells you that people are extra sensitive to products and services being marketed to them. But I think if you're useful, you're helpful, and you're uplifting, you have a higher than average chance of being relevant in this context. Now, being helpful, being useful, being uplifting is particularly important given the context today. What I'm going to share with you next are the 4 big picture themes that are shaping people's attitudes and behaviors. And these attitudes and behaviors are going to be sustained because we are going to be in a prolonged quarantine life for quite some time. So when you look at this, think of these as the needs that your products and services could serve. Right? This is a good starting point to think about what can I market during this time. The first theme is about disrupted supply chains. So right now, lockdowns have affected the flow of goods around the world. And this has affected people's ability and businesses' ability to get raw materials, components, and ingredients. So if you look around you, everything from vegetables to hair clippers to even keyboards for computers with Bluetooth capability, all of those, the supply has been disrupted. And it's going to take a while because the supply chains will take some time to reboot. Workforces are not 100% online just yet. So that means people around the world, even in the Philippines, are going to have to find new sources to get their supplies, or they'll just have to create new sources to begin with. And the interesting thing that this has done is that it's given rise to local supply chains. And from what I've seen, there are 3 kinds. There are local makers or producers. So these could be factories that became idle. This could be somebody's backyard or somebody's home kitchen. Local brands and businesses have sprouted left and right as well. And finally, neighborhood economies have also emerged at the street level, at the barangay level, at the building level, at the village level. And all of these are being powered right now by messaging platforms, which allow quick communication between large groups of people, and digital payments, which allow contactless transactions. So because of this new opportunity that the disruption of supply chains has opened up, local players are now stepping into the picture. And I'd like to share with you a few examples of some products and services that have done really well. First one is called Session Groceries. So this existed even before the pandemic, but I think the quarantine situation has made them especially relevant, all the more so that they have a promise to go direct to the farmer. So the customer, in a way, is supporting the farmers directly. And having used the service myself, it's quite reliable. And you also feel good that you're doing this for a noble cause. The next example is called Safe Life Gear. So the manufacturers of this were originally a plastics and acrylic plant in Balintawak, but obviously with the pandemic, they had to reshape their business. Now, they create protective gear, so face masks, which are more aesthetically designed, inspired by Star Wars. I actually found them through a group called Bounce Back PH, which is SMEs gathering together to find new opportunities for business. And there's me modeling one of their products. It's really cool. I highly recommend it. Now, the last example is 7 days ago, this Facebook group emerged. It's called Buy Local for Locals. And very simply, what it does is give a stage to locally sourced and locally produced goods. And then all of it is organized by location. So it's literally a directory of who's in your neighborhood. And the idea here is you support local enterprise. So these are just a few of the examples, more are emerging. But I think the idea is the local economy is really happening. Even in my own neighborhood, I'm not spared. I have my neighborhood bakeries now. This is my neighbor, literally, and he makes mini baguettes. Really nice. If you want to know more, I can tell you after this talk. But again, local economies are a thing. What does this mean for us? If you're a social enterprise, this has all opened up a new need. And ask yourself, what could you supply to people or businesses? Because if you have something important to supply, there is a business for you, and there is something you can market that people will not take offense to. Right? So this is one thing you need to think about. The second theme is about disrupted incomes, because all businesses have been affected, no matter of size. Incomes have generally been disrupted. So far, many businesses are forecasted to limp along for the next 2 years. Recovery won't happen till maybe 21 or 22. Some businesses will probably downsize, others will just close altogether. This is the reality. So people right now, knowing this, will have to find other ways of earning a living. And at the same time, they're going to have to manage their spending by prioritizing what they spend on. So this is a twin phenomenon. So let's talk about the first, new ways to make a living. Because of that phenomenon, again, enterprises and entrepreneurs have risen to the challenge. And I'll share with you a couple of examples. The first example is the Filipino Nomads Creative Network. Now, again, this is something that existed before the pandemic, but its mission really was to help Filipino creatives work from anywhere in the world with clients anywhere in the world. So it's basically freelancing. What they've done now because of the pandemic is help relocate displaced workers, whether through companies or through freelance opportunities. So look at the bottom of the page. The founders have really rededicated themselves to this purpose, knowing that people will need other ways to make a living. And what's interesting is they've been attracting more of the people who in the past would not consider these sorts of opportunities. But because there's a need to find alternative sources of living, this has become a big thing. My second example is a platform called Reselly. So essentially what this is, it's an app-based platform that turns anyone into a reseller of products, even if you have zero capital. And how does that work? All the merchandise is stored in a central warehouse. So every person who signs up is essentially turned into an agent. So the user experience looks like this. If I'm a customer, I'm looking for items, I pay for it, and I pick up the item in my nearest 7-Eleven. That's the distribution point. The reseller gets a small commission from every item sold. So it's really a reselling proposition. But what's good about this is it helpful? Definitely. Is it useful? Yes. Is it uplifting? Of course. It really ticks all those boxes, especially in a time when people are looking for alternative sources of income. So if you're a social enterprise, there's a big opportunity in this, because ask yourself, what livelihood could you provide to people? And like the previous theme, if you have an answer to this question, you will have a business and you have something to market to that, again, people will welcome and not take offense to. So the other effect of disrupted incomes is what people spend on, essentials. So when we say essentials, what first comes to mind is something like this: food, clothing, shelter, water, right? Basic stuff for survival. Now that's correct. But I think we also have to broaden our view of what is essential, because in a pandemic context, what is essential to people is a lot broader than food, clothing, and shelter. Let me share with you a couple of pictures that I myself took when I was roaming the malls a few weeks ago. This is a picture of a Jayco store. And if you'll notice, there's a long queue outside. Now, if you go closer, you'll notice that each person in the queue is buying at least 5 boxes of donuts at a time. What's going on? Is there a sale, a special price? No. I think it's because people consider the donut to be essential in these times. My personal insight is people are looking for comfort food, a treat to uplift them emotionally amidst, the darkness of the time. But it's essential. It's something important to people. Here's another example. This is a Data Blitz store. So Data Blitz sells computer equipment, video games, gaming consoles, and things like that. Why is there a line here and not other stores? Because people need to find ways to entertain themselves and their families in this quarantine situation. So from that point of view, it's essential. It's not a luxury. It's not a nice to have. It's something that people need to keep their well-being going and to keep the family healthy and productive. And I'm sharing this because the point I'm making is the definition of essential is broader than just basic things for survival. It's about what's essential to being a person. So the implication for enterprises is this: what quote unquote essential product or service could you provide to people? Try to broaden that definition, because in there is an opportunity to create a product or a service that we could pitch to people, and also a conversation that we could start that people, again, will not take offense to. The third theme that's happening right now is compromised mobility. So I think this is something that most of us are familiar with. So aside from physical mobility, our digital mobility is also going to be curtailed for a while. So aside from our obvious internet connection challenges in this country, global players like YouTube and Netflix have also made the conscious decision to slow down the service speed so that the whole internet infrastructure can keep up with the surge in demand. So in a situation like this, we're all going to need to find other ways to access goods, services, and experiences, or to explore the world around us. I mean, we live in our homes right now, but of course, there's still a part of us as people that wants to explore the broader world around us. So there's a need to be served here. And I now want to share with you 2 examples of businesses that are trying to serve this need quite well. The first one is from our own department, tourism. So recently, they've created a program called Travel from Home. So you would imagine, oh, it's probably a live stream of a beach or an IG story somewhere, but they've taken it in an interesting way by putting the message in a medium that all of us are increasingly familiar with, and that's video conferencing. So what they've done is they've started marketing destinations in the Philippines as backgrounds that you can use for Zoom, Teams, or whatever platform of choice you're in. These are Philippine tourist locations, and you can see that they're badged on the upper left. They have versions for morning, afternoon, and night, depending on when your meetings happen. It's quite simple, but quite clever at the same time, because it keeps the Philippines in mind as a destination while stoking your desire to travel here once restrictions are lifted. It's good. It's definitely helpful. It's definitely useful. It's also uplifting. My personal favorite actually are the Batanes backgrounds. They really work well for any Zoom chat. Yeah. My second example is from a business that you wouldn't think would be able to be accessible even in a quarantine situation. So this is an indoor cycling studio called Electric Studio, one of many. And because fitness centers have been closed to the duration of the quarantine and will be closed for the next 6 to 12 months at least, what do? What they've done is they've decided to rent out the bikes in the studio and deliver them to people's houses, along with the shoes and the weights that come with the classes. They've also taken a step further by doing the classes through Zoom. So by doing that, they've maintained some continuity for the business. They've also made themselves still accessible to people despite all the physical and digital limitations. Not a perfect setup, but in doing this, they're still being helpful. They're still being useful for sure to their customers. And because it's about physical fitness, they are helping uplift people despite all the limitations of life right now. Really interesting example. The last theme, so the implication here is, what experiences could you make more accessible to people? So if there are experiences that you sell that you can somehow bring to people's homes, you will have a business and you will have something to market. The final theme is about maintaining well-being. So I think this is the one that's been talked about the most in the media and popular culture, because quarantine life is really taking a toll on people's physical, mental, and emotional well-being. So obviously, people will need to keep being mindful about their well-being in all aspects. So there's definitely opportunity here, and this is something that people will welcome being marketed to. So for physical well-being, here's one example. This is a stance. It's basically a standing desk, and this is one brand of many. There are many versions of this, but this is really addressing the need for physical well-being, especially in your back and your joints, as more of us going to work from home. So it's helpful, useful, and I would say literally uplifting. For emotional well-being, here's one example. This is FAM MNL. What they do is they're advocates for mental health, and they try to create products that bring out in the open psychology and mental health issues. So this is one example: stickers that you could put on your notebook, on your laptop, on your water bottle, or whatever. But what this does is it makes it easy for people to discuss this topic. It makes it fashionable to say that, yeah, maybe I'm going through something as well. So again, it ticks all the boxes. It's helpful, it's useful, it's uplifting. For emotional well-being, here's one example. This is called the Rescued Operation. So this was an initiative created by a group of friends where they realized, the frontliners are going through a lot of emotional distress. And one help they need is to be uplifted so that they can continue doing what is arguably the most important and the toughest job in this pandemic. It's basically haircuts and hairstyling for the frontliners. They visit them. Sounds simple, but massive difference to the life and to the emotional well-being of the frontliners, right? These are the services that are really important right now. So an obvious question to ask is, what could you do then to help care for people's well-being? Again, if you have a product or a service that answers this question, you will be meaningful, you will be important, and you will have enough space to market yourself to people without backlash. So I'm sharing these 4 themes because they're essentially the 4 big needs right now of the COVID-19 economy. And it looks like they're going to persist given that we're in a prolonged quarantine situation. These new needs are actually new problems to solve. And with new problems to solve, present new opportunities for any social enterprise to be helpful, useful, or uplifting. So look at these as the starting points for product development and the development of your marketing. Because if you're in this zone, you have a good chance of being relevant and being heard in the COVID-19 economy. This is the so-called new normal that people have been talking about. So with this as a backdrop, I just want to close with 5 practical steps on how to act on the opportunities of the economy. How do you now go to market? The first thing I think you should do is you have to find a problem that you care about solving. And I emphasize the word care. There are many problems in the world, but as a social entrepreneur, I think it's easiest for us and most rewarding when we put our heart into something that we believe in. Because the work will be hard, the business will be hard. So you at least have to care about it. You have to be invested enough to endure the hard work and the many hurdles that come along the way. So it will help if you market a product that is addressing a problem that you really truly care about solving. Go back to those 4 themes I talked about earlier. Somewhere in the middle of all that is at least 1 or 2 things that speak to your heart, that you care about personally, that you believe in solving. There's a human need in there. Start from that problem. Once you've identified a problem you care about, this is obvious, but I think it bears repeating because it's sometimes understated. You have to make sure your product or your service is compelling. And when I say compelling, it's the right quality at the right price. A lot of the time we think that the best product always wins or the cheapest product wins. No, there's a sweet spot that people are willing to pay for. And we have to spend time developing the product. Right? Even before you go to market, make sure your product or service is right. Test it thoroughly. Try to resist the temptation of taking shortcuts or cutting corners. Right? Look at it from your customer's point of view. Because marketing starts with having a good product. Good advertising, good communications will only highlight the fact that you have a less than good product. Right? So make sure you spend time on product development. This is really important because a bad product will eventually be exposed, especially in this kind of world. Now, there are 3 ways you could come up with a product. So first is you could obviously create a new product or service that doesn't exist. So I think the example earlier is Reselli, right? That's an example of a new product. Or you could modify, redesign, or develop some of your existing product lines or your services. So Safe, the protective gear I shared earlier, is an example of this. Now, finally, and I think most people will be in this situation, you can reposition an existing product or service because a lot of the time you have something that you're stuck with that you developed pre-pandemic, but now you have it. And for whatever reason, it's not so easy to change the product altogether or formulation. So repositioning sometimes is a viable way to go to market. Now, here's one example. Icebreaker mints. Now, mints were the most common use case for mints is because you're in a social setting and you don't want to be called out for bad breath. But in a quarantine situation with social distancing, you don't need it, right? So Hershey's realized that their sales dropped 40 to 50% at the start of lockdowns. But they can't change the product. What do? What they decided was to reposition what is the usefulness of a mint. So I'd like to share with you a video that just briefly captures how they decided to reposition the usefulness of a mint.
Thank you for wearing a mask. For grandparents, neighbors, and cashiers. How about a mint before you mask? Because mask breath, it's real.
So what they've essentially done is flipped it around. Instead of you taking the mint for other people, you need it now because you're always in a mask. Quite clever, but at the same time, quite timely and quite obvious to people. So they didn't change the product. They just repositioned how they communicated it to people. That's a viable option in going to market, even in a COVID-19 economy. Okay? So now that you've identified the need, you have a product, and you know more or less how to pitch it, the next part is targeting. And I think right now it's about selling to the right communities. Crises normally breed communities because people have a natural instinct to gather together, right? To seek strength from one another and to help each other. We default to cooperation in a time of crisis. I've observed the same thing with COVID-19. Communities are the thing. They're sprouting left and right. People are naturally gravitating to communities. So you could argue that the new target market are communities, right? So my advice would be to find relevant communities to your product and the need that you're serving and market to as many of these relevant communities as you can, because this is now how you get the word out about your product or service. Just a couple of examples. So there's Dad Bud PH. Be a buddy to your fellow daddy. All things daddyhood, fatherhood, family raising. This is one community you could think about if you had a product or service there. If you're in the food business, there's a Viber community called Food Contacts. So everything from ingredients, do-it-yourself cooking kits, cooked food, it's all here. These are just 2 of the many communities that are out there, and they're literally sprouting by the day. So take the time to do your research, get into these communities, be a member, stalk them if you have to. But this is the new target market in the COVID-19 economy. Fourth, tell your story well. Now, storytelling is still a big part of marketing, even in the COVID-19 economy, because stories sell products and services. Stories also help explain to people in easy to digest terms, why do I need this in my life? So that's important, whether it comes in the form of a video, a GIF, a meme, right? A copy ad, whatever. Storytelling still matters. And if you look at some of the examples I showed earlier, you can distill them into a simple story. Reselli, have a business even without capital. Filipino nomads, you can work from anywhere in the world with anyone in the world. So the COVID-19 economy doesn't stop storytelling. However, what I will say is, as you tell your story, you have to be sensitive to the times. Never ever forget this. People are on edge. They don't. They won't appreciate it if they feel like you're being opportunistic or you're pandering to them. So I'll share with you one of the best examples in the world, and this is from Nike. They've done a really good job consistently throughout the pandemic, helping keep their brand relevant, but doing it in a way that connects to what people are looking for. So this film is something they released last week, and it's about keeping people's spirits up as we enter what they call the comeback phase of the quarantine. All of us are ready to go out. We're behind, but like sports, we're all ready to succeed.
No one's ever come back from 3-1. Agonizing defeat.
Down 5-1.
She's got to get it all.
We've all been underestimated and counted out. In those moments, we felt like it was over.
It's not looking good for Rafa.
But it's when we're given no chance
Idol, what could Osaka be thinking right now?
that we somehow found that last bit of strength to keep fighting.
Running down to see if he's okay.
And then we did what no one thought we could. Not even ourselves.
That's just random.
We came back from the impossible.
Round is over. 52 years.
From being broken. We found a way when it seemed hopeless. We came back when we should have been long forgotten. And we did it time and time again. Right now, we're fighting for something much bigger than a win or championship. But if we learned anything from sports, is that no matter how far down we may be, we are never too far down to come back.
So more than a beautiful thought, what's interesting is they're not selling you a particular product. They're selling you a spirit, a belief that, uplifts you, as I was saying earlier. And it uplifts you to the point that you feel like going out there, getting a sweat, preferably in some Nike shoes or clothes. Right? Well done. Now, it's not exclusive to global brands. I think the Philippines has some good examples. I think Nescafe is an interesting one. They've been recently marketing around this thought of bangon, which is to rise up, which I think is a good thought, especially in a time when people's confidence and optimism is challenged. That's a great platform. However, as I said earlier, you also have to be sensitive. So even a platform like this can be taken the wrong way if the twist is insensitive. So recently, they had this experience, and I say this with all due respect, where they created a post along the bangon story. And the post was about a worker who walks 20 kilometers just to get to work every day. The intention here was a story about resilience, that despite all the odds, you will rise up, babangon ka. I think the intent was noble. But what they missed out on was, rather than talk about it, as somebody on Twitter pointed out, why don't you just help the person travel? Because being helpful, being useful is probably more important than just talking about it or just telling a story. So again, as you tell your story well, don't forget to still be helpful first and be useful, right? And be sensitive to the sentiments of the times, because there's a lot more going on than just, as I said, marketing. There's a bigger picture around us. Now, finally, one secret right now is you have to make it easy to find you and buy you. Now, right now, because a lot of the supply chains have been disrupted, accessibility is not as easy. Convenience and accessibility have become much more important than a wide variety of products. In fact, what I've seen in the market, whether in physical stores or online stores, is if you're not available at that moment when people need you, people are a little more willing to find an alternative because they need it, and they just need it now, right? Again, this has been because of the context surrounding us right now. People are valuing convenience and accessibility more than ever. In fact, they're willing to pay a little more for it, right? But it's no longer the case that loyalty alone will see you through. You have to make it easy to find you and buy you, right? So to close, I think these are certainly challenging times, but the imperative for businesses and social enterprises to serve people, I think, doesn't change. I started by saying that this isn't about marketing, because my point of view is this is about serving people. That hasn't changed. And we serve people by being helpful, by being useful, and being uplifting. Serve people in a human way, and your business will have a higher than average chance of being meaningful and successful in the COVID economy. And that, for me, is really what, quote unquote, marketing in this economy is about. Thank you very much for listening, and let's now chat for questions and discussions.
Hey, Gino. Thanks for that
Thank you.
presentation. So meaty. Actually, you covered so much and a little bit more. Um, I want to ask about something specific. You mentioned about being sensitive, though. You find the sensitivity during this time is important, and especially now that a lot of people are there's there's this call out culture. So if they find something that's offensive to them, uh, they will start calling you out, and like it might be whatever campaign or whatever communications campaign you might have might backfire. So I think my question here, and since you talked about being sensitive to whatever you're going to communicate especially during this time as we uh, go through this new COVID economy. I guess my question is, how can we ensure, if I were an enterprise, a social enterprise, or any business, I'd like to start getting back out there and communicating, selling my products and services. If I were to be sensitive, like, is there a way for me to like do some sort of litmus test before like I do like a big broadcast of my comms? Um, what steps, I guess, should I do if I were to think of putting out new promotional material, and how can I make sure, or like at least reduce the possibility of people lashing out or calling me out?
Yeah, that's a great question because that's a reality that every business, big or small, faces, is call out
Yeah.
culture. So for me, I think there's two things you can do that are practical. First is before you launch what you're doing, try to research and look at people or businesses talking about similar topics and themes because chances are somebody's already tackling the topic. Remember, not just businesses, but every single person now is marketing themselves. They're
Mhm.
conscious about their personal brand. So somebody must have talked about it already. Try see the reactions to those topics that are similar to yours. The other thing you can do is to do a little test pilot under a different name or maybe under a different product so that at least you reduce the risk to your real brand. So think of it as like a beta test, right? Or a
Mhm.
pilot that you can at least contain. Those are two practical things you can do.
Mhm. Okay. So one is look for a similar
Yes.
product and see how they did it and how people reacted. And two is
Yes.
try to do like bits, like a beta pilot, not necessarily
A full
on
blown launch.
connected
Yes.
or like really connected to your brand, and test it out. Okay, thanks. That's great. Practical advice. Um, and then of course, right now, social media is one of the most popular mediums of people for how brands can put their stuff out there. How can we leverage on social media? Which, like, if we go more detail, what where if I were a brand or a social enterprise, where can I start, or how can I leverage social media as a small business to get to get sales or to get people uh, subscribing or purchasing my products or services?
Yeah. So I go back to what I said earlier about communities. Communities now are the most important target market
Mm-hmm.
because that's in the absence of mass media right now. That's where people are converging
Mm-hmm.
naturally because people are now doing it to look for things, to find counsel and things like that. So
Mm-hmm.
depending on your product or service, try to identify the top 10 communities that are most relevant to your product. So
Mm-hmm.
my example earlier was, let's say you're
Yeah.
into something related to parenting or family, communities like Dad Bud would be perfect.
Right.
And you'll discover as you do your research, there are literally thousands, hundreds of thousands of communities for every possible area of interest.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So start there. Look for communities that match yours.
Mm-hmm. So
And these
yeah,
communities, don't just exist on Facebook. They
right.
also exist on messenger apps like Viber,
Oh, yeah.
Telegram, WhatsApp. Just get in there.
So I do notice like the hyper, actually Mischief One also mentioned that it's the market now is very hyper local because of also the physical, the geographic limitations that we have right now. So it's better for us, like if I'm starting out, or like what I have to research, like look for the communities that have like that focus on the target audience that's perfect for my product. How about boosting, or like still using ads, Facebook ads and all those things? Are they still relevant or useful for
They're
me?
still relevant if you can afford it, because what boosting essentially is it's paying to make sure that more people see you. And in general, right, the more people see you, the more likely that the more people who are possible who can encounter your brand. So I think that's necessary. However,
Mhm,
you
mhm.
need to try to balance that with what I'll describe as organic or non-paid
Okay.
promotion. That's why if you get into communities and there's a natural fit between the community and your
Uh-huh.
product,
Uh-huh.
the chances of them passing it on and advertising it for you are higher. And you want that because you don't spend for that,
Yeah, because
right?
it's more organic.
But you need both. You need both.
Okay. Okay. Thanks. We have a question also from one of our attendees. How could you market a product that everyone is also marketing? So meaning, yeah, people are already marketing the same thing. Specifically, although it is relevant now, mental wellness and mental health. That's something that's very relevant today. But a lot of people are offering it. So if I was, a practitioner, like a social enterprise who wants to promote that, like how can I be able to, yeah, stand out and.
I love this question because it's obviously a relevant need for
Mhm,
people. And
mhm.
you're right. There's also, I would say, an oversupply of solutions for this. So the answer to this goes back to something that's basic marketing. It's really about differentiation, right?
Mhm.
I think the problem right now, if I may call it that, with mental health as a need is because everybody's talking about it the same way. So you get to a point, because that's happening, people will get fatigued. It's like asking people for
Right.
donations. If
Yeah.
everybody's taking the same tact, people get tired. So my advice would be find a different aspect to mental health, or maybe use a different language or call it something else. For example, in Japan,
Mhm,
one of the
mhm.
most popular services now that's related to mental health doesn't use the language of mental health. It says couples counseling. What is that about? Because now people in Japan have been forced to stay, husband and wife have been now forced to stay with each other for hours a day. It's causing some new tension in relationships. That's mental health, but we
Mhm.
call it couples counseling. It sets them apart from everybody else, but at the same time, it repackages it. I think that's probably my advice to it, because now there's an oversupply of providers in that space.
Okay. Yeah. That's great. At saka the point, ako, my personal question, how about, because in the Spark project, there are a lot of donation-based campaigns also that are using the site. Um, how, on that end, how can they differentiate naman? Because like I noticed during the first few weeks of the lockdown and during yung of the pandemic, of course there is a heightened sense of parang donation, or like yeah, generosity from people helping the frontliners. But now after 6 weeks, after 2 months, of course there's a fatigue, and then the interest somewhat died down, or there's no more, if I were to put it badly put, like novelty in helping, but people still need the help. So how can we change the communications surrounding donations or helping those?
Yeah. I think the short answer there is change the focus, because the desire to help naman did not go away.
Okay.
I do think though, as this pandemic prolongs, people are realizing that other sectors, other groups need help. So what I would
Yeah.
suggest is shift the focus to those other groups that people do want to help. So
Mm-hmm.
that way, people don't get tired, and you've almost refreshed their desire to help. Because sometimes when you keep helping the same group, you're tao ka lang eh. You can't help but get tired of it, and you
Yeah.
wonder, am I doing enough?
Yeah.
But if you shift it, it's like people's energy gets renewed. So that's what I would suggest.
Okay. Thank you. We have a question, another question here. Yeah. So can you help us explain better, the relationship between marketing and sales? Because oftentimes, yeah, people get confused about
Yeah,
it, or are there similarities, or are they totally different concepts? Yeah, can you please help us differentiate?
I love this question too, because I one of the things I really believe in is simplifying things and removing the jargon. And a lot of the confusion is people speak in jargon sometimes when they talk about marketing and sales. So I'll explain it in very simple terms that you could explain to your mother. So what we want is to sell, right? To sell, we need people to know, A, we exist, where to find us, and why we matter. That's marketing. We're letting people know where we are and why we matter, right? What marketing does is increase the chances that people will know about you and increase the chances that people will find you meaningful. Between that, is already people's decision making. But that's what marketing does. So that's why, in some cases, yeah, you can make a one-to-one correlation, but a lot of the time, it's really probability. What marketing does is increase the probability that somebody will find you and buy you. That's how I would look at it.
Okay, so marketing is increasing the probability that you get a sale.
Yes, because I saw you, I think you're meaningful to me, and it looks like you have a good product at a fair price.
Okay.
But you can't brainwash people into buying the product. They still have to make that decision on their own.
Right. Now let's move. Just to deepen that on that topic. How about branding? How is that different naman from marketing and sales?
Great. Okay, a brand is what I would describe as a tool that you use when you go to market. Okay, a lot of people think that the brand is just the logo. However, your product, and it's stored in the brain and the heart. Where does that come from? That comes from every single thing that people experience about your product and services. So for me, brand is everything that people can see, smell, touch. It's your product, your packaging, how you communicate, how you talk to people. All of that is branding. And so for me, branding is everything. Everything you do is in a way building your brand. So I don't really separate it. It's natural to think of it as marketing. Everything you do in marketing is building your brand.
So is it would it be a good analogy to think, like, let's say, if your business or your brand's business is like a person, how the person acts, how the person does things, how it does his work, would be the
person is the brand.
The person is the brand. So,
yes, because that's where because that's where your customers get their impression.
Okay.
It's from.
Okay.
So every piece counts. It's not just the logo.
Okay. Thanks. I know that you are now with SM Supermalls, right? How long have you been with SM?
Yes.
You just joined the organization quite recently.
I just finished my first year a week and a half ago.
Okay,
so it's
happy anniversary.
Interesting year, to say the least.
Yeah. So
yes.
how has SM, being of course a mall, right? How has it been affected during this time, and how are, in terms of in the work that you're doing now with SMOs, how have you helped them adjust and cope in terms of messaging, marketing, and now that the ECQ has been slightly lifted, now it's GCQ. How has the process been like for SM Supermalls under your leadership?
Yeah, well, to be fair, it's not just me. It's me working with a lot of other people. But I mean, the biggest challenge for us, like many businesses, we were not allowed to open, right? The only thing that was allowed to open were essential stores like supermarket and pharmacy. So from day one, our mindset was, this is about service. This is not about making money at this point. We had to open the mall so that people had access to essential services. So that's how we started the early days of the quarantine. As the restrictions got lifted, we just evolved this idea of service. How else can we serve our customers and our tenants? So on my side, for example, we took the initiative to create services to increase the accessibility of products to customers. We created delivery services from the malls. We created drive-through and curbside pickups. We created personal shopper services so that even if you're not allowed to go to the mall can still come to you. So again, it's coming from the thought of service, and we've just adjusted what service means because the context changed. And I think that's something we're going to continue doing as this new situation sustains itself. So it's been interesting. It's not easy, I will admit, but you just have to find ways to carry on.
And if there is something that you've learned during that process that could be applicable to even smaller businesses and social enterprises like most of our attendees here, what would it be?
I think don't be afraid to try something new or you've never tried before. because the times demand the times are new, and therefore they demand new approaches and new solutions. So in fact, now is the best time to try something new because everybody is looking for an answer. And I can tell you that nobody can predict with certainty what the future is like. If they can, I'm going to tell you now, they're probably lying. Nobody knows.
Yeah.
So it's up to us to figure out how to navigate it.
Yeah, totally agree. Like, even if, let's say, you have something, you've thought of something to do now, maybe in a week or a month's time, mag-change na naman yung mag-change na naman
Yes.
yung situation, hindi natin alam. So, does this also mean na creating plans? Let's say, I want to create like a marketing plan, or I want to create like a new plan to do this. Is that something still relevant now, or something that you would advise given the ever-changing landscape?
I think it's always good to have a plan. But I think what's new now is, let's say you have a plan, whether it's 3 months, 6 months, or a year, but you revisit that plan a little more frequently. So in my case, for example, daily, weekly, and if you need to change, you change it. I think that's what's new. You're straddling between short-term, mid-term, and long-term all at the same time.
Yeah.
I think that's the planning that's happening now. So you just have to be a little more agile and quick to adjust.
Yeah, like mas agile, mas
but you need to plan.
iterative.
You still have to have a plan.
You still have to plan. Okay, so there's a question. How would you invite people to avail of your service if traditionally your service is not something people pay a lot for?
I think the real question being asked is, how do I get people to pay more for this thing I'm selling? Because I think people right now think it's cheap. Without knowing what your product or service is, the best advice I can give you is, remember, people are willing to pay more if they think what you're selling is valuable, right? So go back. Right now, as constructed, is it valuable enough to people that they're willing to pay a higher price? Because if you can answer that question, people will. Here's an example. A lot of the delivery services now are hard to access, right? Grab, Lala Food. So what have people done? They've innovated on their own. They've decided to put a little incentive for the driver. They've added an extra fee to entice the driver to pick up their delivery. So in that situation, because it's so valuable to people, they were willing to add extra. Right? So I think go back to that. Find something in your product that's valuable enough to people that they'll want to pay for. And what I've seen is, again, people are not necessarily buying the cheapest thing right now. They're buying what is essential and what is important.
I also noticed that convenience, accessibility and convenience is more of a decision point now for people. Diba? Parang they need the product now, so they're willing to pay a premium for something that they need now. So if we are,
earlier before we jumped into this call, right, we were joking about the Nintendo Switch economy, why the prices have increased. That's an example. If it's valuable enough, people will pay for it.
Yeah, which brings us also to the definition now of non-essentials, which actually you did mention a while ago. Na when we talk about non-essentials, hindi lang siya food or like the usual what we thought of. Now, as businesses, we have to think of how can we, kumbaga, our products bring back some sort of normalcy in the lives of people inside their house now that they're all stuck at home, or at least they spend more time at home than outside. So whatever they need while they're in the house could be considered essential.
Exactly. In fact, if it helps preserve your physical, emotional, or mental well-being, I would argue it's essential.
It's essential, diba? Parang if it helps you survive inside the house, then even Nintendo Switch, diba?
If it helps you maintain your humanity, it's essential.
It's essential.
Yes.
Can be. So if we are businesses, like for those that are watching now, think of how you can reintegrate your product or service back or like into the daily lives of people in the context that they're most of the time inside their houses.
And I think also suspend our instinct sometimes to judge people. Again, this is connected to the call-out culture.
Yeah.
I mean, if somebody thinks that, jumbo-sized prawns are essential, well, good for you. Right? He's not causing any harm.
Yeah.
Opportunity to serve that need. So I think suspending jump times is a good thing.
Is it also advisable na because of the call out culture, parang as a brand or as a business, uh, in a way, we could expect that. We could expect people really can't really please everyone, and some people might think that what you're selling is insensitive during this time, and they just really just have to. It's really just part of it, or do we have to really spend extra effort on being sensitive to all during this time?
I think you have to, as best as you can, right? You have to spend as much effort as you can being sensitive in general. I'm not
Okay.
saying pander to all people, because you're right. The truth is, you cannot please everybody. You will always have a fan, a hater, a detractor, whatever. It's true for any business.
Yeah.
Worry that true though is operate with a playbook or something, but it's part of reality. Prepare for it. You cannot please everyone, and
Okay.
sometimes you make mistakes. That's fine. And when that happens, acknowledge it and correct it fast and move on. I think what I've seen is people are more forgiving if you respond fast and you
Yeah.
respond with transparency.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Na also quick to respond or apologize or acknowledge that you've been, let's say, insensitive, let's say, to a certain group. And that would, I think right now, humanity is more, parang being more human is more appreciated these days, and being more authentic.
Yeah, even if you don't please 100% of people, if you got 80%, that's great already.
Mhm.
Right? You can't please everyone.
Mhm. I have a question. We have a question from Ali. How do we know when to connect with brand ambassadors?
Great question. I mean, all over the world, diba, the influencer business has been upended. Suddenly, influencers are trying to find their way. I think the answer to the question is: are you marketing something that people are appreciating right now? Because if you are, then there should be no reason why you cannot engage a quote unquote brand ambassador. Because again, what you're doing is welcome. Having said that, the choice of ambassador now is important, because the ambassador has to sync with the need that you're serving. Again, how are you being helpful, being useful, or uplifting? If the ambassador matches that, great. If it doesn't, it's an obvious ploy for attention. So I think it's really just going back to that. How are you being helpful, useful, or uplifting?
Mhm. Okay. So for social enterprises, so Rod Mark, one of our attendees, he just said like, thank you for your great presentation. He said, he has a question for social enterprises who work with different far-flung communities during this pandemic, and who have to connect with the always changing quarantine rules set by the LGUs. Do you have a suggestion as to how social enterprises could market themselves to the rule makers so that they could have an easier time dealing with whatever new guidelines come up? Is there a one overriding strategy, or should it be catered per LGU if ever? Yeah.
That's a great question. That's very close to our reality, because even
Yes.
us in our business, we deal with different LGUs. I think what I've observed is, of course, every LGU is different because the locations are different and the people are different. So my only advice is, you have to engage with the person in mind. That's my first advice.
Okay.
They all respond to different stimulus. Second, whatever approach you choose, I think come there with a suggestion or a solution. Don't just complain or bring a problem to the LGU, because it makes them defensive.
Mhm.
Right? That's the best thing I think we can do right now. There's too much calling out, too much ranting and complaining, but not enough people coming back with proposals and constructive feedback. Try to do that for a change.
Thanks. Another question. Findings show that benefits of hiring people with disabilities in um, hiring people with disabilities included improvements in profitability, like profits and cost effectiveness, turnover and retention, reliability and punctuality, employee loyalty, and company image, and as well as competitive advantage, inclusive work culture, and ability awareness. Secondary benefits for people with disabilities included improved quality of life and income, enhanced self-confidence, expanded social network, and a sense of community. conclusions, there are several benefits to hiring people with disabilities. I guess the question or the insight here is like, what are your thoughts on hiring people with disabilities in business? Is that something that more businesses should take on, or yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
I think pre-pandemic, right? This was probably an area that a lot of businesses would overlook in general. But my sense is because of this pandemic, a lot of businesses, big and small, are suddenly more open to new ways of thinking about work arrangements. I mean, for example, work from home. In a work from home setup, right? It doesn't matter if you're disabled or not. Everybody's generally equal. So I think that new context is probably going to open some minds along the way. I just think there's probably a little lag because right now a lot of the focus is on survival. But I think once that settles down, I do anticipate that these kinds of conversations will start to open up. Because the working environment is changed. It's equalized things for people.
Right. There's a follow-up question here related to that. Like, how can we inspire more companies, especially SMEs in the Philippines, to hire PWDs as a means to improve?
I love this question. In fact, I think this is probably a good question to brainstorm around, to come up with a social enterprise around. Right, because there's a gap. There's nobody doing this. So why not start now?
Okay. So far that's the questions that we have. Please, for those who still want to ask questions for Gino, feel free to comment down below for any questions, and so that we can share it with them. What else, Gino, can we talk about?
So there was a question here on how would you compromise between what's essential for your market and what's essential for your vision. It's a great question.
Oh, yeah.
It's a founder's question.
Yeah.
I think that's the fundamental dilemma of being a founder of a social enterprise or any business that's yours, right? When do you sell out? I think there's no hard and fast rule. I think it goes back to what are you comfortable living with? If you can sleep at night, do it. If you can't, don't go for it. I mean, for me, in my whole career, that's how I've tried to operate, and I've been in situations that it's not so clear cut. But if I sleep well at night, at least I know I've done something right that I can live with. And that's the best advice I can offer. Yeah. It's a tough one, and it's a personal decision that will vary for each person.
I agree, because most of the enterprises that I've talked with also, of course, they set out with a vision already. I mean, like when they started their business, they have a vision, and they're deeply rooted by the mission of their business. And now, because of COVID, things change, and sometimes they're now forced, or like circumstances force them to kind of recalibrate what they do, and to the point that rethink, to the point that they have to rethink the vision that they started out with. And yeah, good suggestion. Actually, this has been also a recurring question to our different speakers, to our previous speakers. Now, how can we reconcile that? And yeah, that's a good insight. Now, at the end of the day, it's really about, again, it goes back to you. If you can sleep better at night, if you're comfortable going forward with a new version of your vision, and that's okay with you, then go. But if it's not, then we have to just rethink things. No?
Yeah, a mentor of mine put it really well when he said, you have to think about doing the greatest amount of good for the greatest amount of people. Okay. Just follow that, and more often than not, you'll be okay. There's a nice question here on luxury goods.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
So how can we reposition luxury goods such as jewelry in a way that is still meaningful and sensitive to the times? I like this. I think you have to go back to the people. Why do they care so much about luxury? What does it mean? I think the answer is in there. Because they're obviously seeing something that the general public is not. So understand that motivation, and then build your whole product and your storytelling around that. And then finally, I think you might want to handle it quietly, how you communicate it. I mean, there are some people who want to flaunt luxury, but there are also some people who want to handle it quietly. I would suggest a more subtle approach.
So another question here, how much marketing do you need to do if you're a B2B?
Nice question. The same amount that you need to do even if you're a consumer brand. You're always marketing because businesses are also customers. They're also people with biases, perceptions, emotions. You need to sell yourself to them, right? So it's the same. The only difference is the context. You're not selling for personal use. You're selling for company's use, but you're still talking to a person. So you have to do it as much as you can in how you build your product, how you call it, how you talk about it, how you present yourself, etc.
And maybe also the medium or where you market it might also change. Because let's say kung
Yes.
consumer goods siya, retail siya, sige, social media, you go with social media or in your Facebook, but with B2B, it might be somewhat different. You have to, kumbaga, talk to them where they are. So it could be like through an email or...
And also be sensitive. Like, for example, I get this all the time. Ever since this pandemic started, obviously businesses are selling to businesses. So every day, I literally get 10 notes on LinkedIn Messenger from people selling me things.
LinkedIn.
And it will always be a generic letter like, Dear Mr. Ganyan, I know you have a problem X. Can I sell you solution Y? There's no thought put into connecting with me as a customer. It's just done very in a templated way. So that alone is already
very cold.
Yeah, it's cold. It's cold. I'm still a person.
Okay.
I have feelings too. I have worries. Talk to me. Again, be human.
Actually, yeah, good point. LinkedIn for businesses, no, kung B2B, baka LinkedIn would be a better platform to find future clients. But yeah, still be human and not do templated calls.
Yeah, and all due respect to the real estate and financial services industry, I have many friends there, but sometimes they're agents, right? They just approach you and sell without regard for who they're selling to.
With a templated, yeah, there's one here. Do you still market B2B even if you're at capacity?
I'm assuming that you're at capacity means you've maxed out your production capability. Yeah. I think in that case, regardless of the pandemic, if you cannot sell anything, don't go to market. Yeah, because that's the fastest way to frustrate your customers. You stoke their desire for your product or service, but you can't meet it. That's a recipe for disaster. Don't if you have to.
I would
build up your capacity.
Yeah, because let's say even like the food deliveries or like the stores, let's say that would have on their e-commerce site, let's say certain products, and then they say it's in stock and then it's out of stock. It really is a recipe for bad user or customer experience. So if I were
especially now, as I said earlier, convenience is the number one thing.
Yeah, so update your stock levels and don't sell if you know that you can't deliver.
I mean, too many businesses have been guilty boosting and doing sponsored ads when they have no stock. I've been a victim of that a couple of times already.
I think a good way also to manage expectations, or a good way to do that, is to manage expectations. Like I have also encountered e-commerce. I also purchased some e-commerce in e-commerce some products, and then they really explicitly tell you that they can only deliver, say, in 3 days. So let's say food. I ordered some bread, but it's not in demand like Food Panda. But they were very explicit in saying that, okay, when you order this, it will be delivered in 2 days. So you will expect it, let's say I order it on Monday, I expect it on Wednesday. So that way, even before you click the checkout button, you know what you're getting into. And you know the delivery time. So managing expectation can help you provide a better customer experience.
I agree, because it's a human thing to do, right? A lot of the time we forget marketing is marketing to people. So you have to treat them like people, right? So be human. And it goes back to that.
Thanks. So we have a two questions here. What are campaigns, and what are they most and when are they most relevant? Would it be possible to campaign to get volunteers if you're a for-profit social enterprise?
Okay. So, the first question, I think, is about the meaning of campaign, because it's the marketing jargon. A campaign is a is a set of operations that you run in a specific time. So for 1 month, we're going to wage war in this place. I think the marketing world borrowed it. So if I'm going to remove the jargon, what it just means is it's a program that you're running for a specific amount of time. That's a campaign. So a campaign can be as short as 1 week, 1 month, 2 years, right? So that's what it is. So it's a set of programs. So to the second question, would it be possible to campaign to get volunteers if you're a for-profit social enterprise? Yes. And again, if you have a compelling pitch to people, you know who the right people to pitch it to, and you know the right places to find them, by all means, do it. Right? Just because we're in a pandemic doesn't mean profit stops. I think it was Chit who said this yesterday, or was it you? Social enterprise. A lot of entrepreneurs forget the enterprise part. They're still here to make money because you can't do good if you're not making money.
Yeah.
Right. So don't be ashamed about that. I mean, charity is nice, but I would argue if you had the means to fund your passion and your advocacy, even better.
Okay. So the advice is before they do the campaign, first is they have to identify first who they want to talk to.
Yes.
That's actionable steps that they can do. They can do.
And
first.
then understand, is what I'm pitching meaningful to those people? Because if it's not, go back to the drawing board.
Okay. We have another question from Jan Michael. How are you seeing contactless transaction in the marketing strategies of most companies now?
It's an essential now for safety reasons, obviously. But I think my observation about the pandemic it's accelerated the adoption of people's adoption for these things. Even if you didn't want to, you had no choice but to try it because it was the only way you could access goods and services. In the press, for example, both GCash and PayMaya reported that they saw a 200-300% increase in user take-up. So I think it's going to become as normal as paying with a credit card. In fact, it'll come to a point where you don't even think about it anymore. It's just assumed that it's part of your marketing and your product.
Okay. How about art galleries? What are your thoughts on that? Like art galleries, musicians, artists. Of course, there's they're as affected by this pandemic. Like
as somebody who came from a creative industry, I'm very passionate about that. There was a meme I saw, forget who originated it, but I love the thought. So if you think that artists, musicians are not, and filmmakers are not essential, imagine a world without movies, music, books, etc. That's perfect, right? So for me, the meaning of art is not going to go away. The format of the art gallery, though, might be in question, right? In a world where we can't congregate. So I would focus on that. Is there another way that we can make the art gallery experience accessible in this new context? I would argue it's the same thing that Netflix did to cinemas. They're both venues for movie watching. They're just in different formats. But the desire to watch film and to appreciate creative work hasn't gone away. So change the format is my suggestion.
So art is still essential. Actually,
I think so.
Yeah, I believe so too. Just change the experience or how they experience art.
To share, I don't think it's a coincidence that if you look at stores that sell art supplies and art materials, they did well throughout the quarantine. That's not an accident. It's relevant.
That's right. How should competition between businesses look like in a time of crisis like COVID? Should there be more cooperation among competitors?
Yes. And I think that's something that I believe in, COVID or not. Right? I mean, yes, we all compete with each other, but I think we're stronger if we compete in a healthy way. We learn from each other. We support each other as industries, regardless of what industry you go to. Yeah, cooperation is the better way.
Now, in the context of e-learning and education, how do we position our service in a sea of seemingly the same offering? We are known to provide high-caliber progressive education pre-COVID, and we want to bring the same quality service and brand positioning in the online market.
I like this question because, again, I'm personally invested. I've been recently shopping for online programs for my daughter. Two things for me. I think first is market yourself with honesty. Because, again, this whole situation is new. There are no models, but I've seen that a lot of these educational institutions talk as if they found the perfect answer to distance learning. Nobody has. So I think some amount of honesty and transparency would be good. I think second, being clear about what it is you're doing differently without having to resort to jargon.
Yeah.
Again, in technical industries, kasi the temptation is you talk from your area of expertise,
Yeah.
right? But to the layman, they don't understand it. So I think humanizing how you communicate what you're doing is a helpful way to stand out, because that it'll make it easy for people to remember what you're offering.
Mhm. Let's talk about trend watching. In do you see any trends, or if you did mention it, some of it in your talk, but right now, like if do you see any trends that aspiring entrepreneurs or even those who have businesses, uh, some trends that they can look into and see how they could apply in their own businesses?
Yeah, I think that's what I tried to cover with the four themes. But if I was to choose which of those four themes I think would be the most interesting, it's the hyperlocalism.
The hyperlocalism.
Yeah, because that doesn't just hit products and services. I think if I connect it to what's happening around the world, there was a whole shift away from globalization. It all went local.
Yeah,
So I
yeah,
think the pandemic is just going to magnify that even more. This sense of pride in my locality, in my neighborhood, is going to become a recurring theme in the months ahead. So I would focus on that.
hyperlocalism. That's great. For so from the Philippine Coffee Board, for textiles and weavers, we have helped before as they also grow coffee. How do we help them now? Is textile an essential?
Great question. Textile and coffee beans kasi are both parang raw materials or ingredients. I think by themselves, unless you are a producer, it's not relevant to you. So I think we have to find the end use that makes it relevant. In coffee's case, diba, the end use was productivity at work. What's the equivalent of that for textile? I just think it's a little challenging now because people aren't going out to dress up.
Yeah.
But if we can find a good end use, we can definitely make textiles meaningful. I mean, in the same way that suddenly acrylics had a second life because of PPEs and sneeze guards, there's gotta be an equivalent for textiles.
Okay, if you're a B2B for schools, would it be much better to pivot customers to parents because of the chaos of schools right now? So if you're a business that works with schools and now the schools are now also, adapting to this new normal, how can I adjust?
I don't have full visibility on your financial picture, but I think the attempt to find that different stream of revenue, I think is good. I would agree with that. And yes, pivoting to parents instead of schools is good. I mean, I have a specific business in mind. For example, Senko Link, who distributes all the Apple technology to schools. I've noticed they're going straight to the parents who now need solutions for work from home. That's a good example of it's okay to pivot to parents. But I think the principle there is you're trying to find a revenue stream that's viable versus something that got shut off. Yes, I would agree with that in principle.
And how about schools right now? If you're an educational institution or a group, like what would your advice for them be? Or what are your thoughts on
this is
educational sector?
I think it's obvious to people that schools as we know it probably aren't an option for the next year. So we can't go back there. So I think the focus is about what can we do in the meantime to at least get by and prepare ourselves for the time that we're ready. For me, I would focus the conversation on protecting the educator.
Okay.
Because that's something that's being taken for granted right now. These are people who've put their lives at the service of other people's children. It's a vocation, it's not just a job. But nobody's talking about protecting the educator. I would focus on that. Yeah, there's a lot of displaced educators right now.
Yeah, good point. Yeah. Okay, what else? Yeah, we still have 10 minutes left, guys. So if you have questions for Gino, please do send them over.
If they're shy, they can just send it, forward it later, and I can just answer separately. It's all right.
Okay. Is there a way, how can they get in touch with you?
I'm very easily found on Twitter and LinkedIn. So just search for my name. It's there.
All right.
I'm happy to engage.
Just some comments. Comprehensive and enlightening presentation. The topics and points shared are easy to digest. Thank you.
Thank you too. I tried my best.
Ang dami nga natin natututunan ngayon with Gino. Ang galing. What else? If you're someone who wanted, I do know that you do mentor a lot of social enterprises. And if a lot of our attendees here also, some of them have businesses but are interested in social entrepreneurship. So might want to transform their business or startup to a more social one. What would be your advice to them, or what, like, let's say, what first steps would you advise them to take as they, consider transitioning to a more social business?
I think being clear about two things. First is you have to be clear why you're doing it.
Okay.
And I think if you're doing it for fashionable reasons or because it sounds nice to try, don't.
Mhm.
Because as you would know yourself, it's a vocation. It's something you do as a commitment. So you better be invested in it, right?
Yeah.
You're not doing it for fame or for money. Because if you wanted to get rich, there are easier ways, right? Second, I think you have to be clear about what area you want to focus on. It goes back to what I said earlier. You have to find a problem you care about, because it's hard. And the only thing that will sustain you is belief and faith. So you have to be focused on something you personally care about. I think start with that. Everything will follow.
Yeah. If I were to add with that, like, if you do plan on starting a social enterprise, you have to think of it also being committed to it long term. That's why it's important that you have to really think about what problem you want to solve, and if you really want to solve it, parang in the long term, or like must to commit yourself to that mission in for the long haul, right? And yeah, being clear about that to yourself, and doing a lot of introspection in what you feel passionate and strongly about.
I absolutely agree. It's a commitment.
It's a commitment. Okay. Another question from the Philippine Coffee Board. If you would start a business now, what would it be?
This is not an original idea. I've seen some versions of this, but I think it's come out because it's quite timely. Family counseling. Because now families are forced to deal with each other for periods of time that they did not plan for, right? And there's no defined expertise in this area, in this situation. So it's white space. I would focus on that.
Yeah, good point. Like the one that you mentioned a while ago about Japan.
Yeah, the couples counseling.
Yeah, and how it's tied into the question of Anne a while ago about mental wellness.
Yeah, it's mental health, just a different form.
Yeah. All right. Is there anything else you would like to share? Final words for our attendees today.
Yeah, maybe it's a final word. These, again, as I said, these are very difficult, and I hate to use this word because it's overused, unprecedented, because it truly is. Nobody's ever gone through this. So if you find it overwhelming, you're struggling, you're intimidated, it's okay. I mean, all of us are. But what I can tell you is you just have to try. Don't be afraid, and be open to adjusting as you go along, and trust that at some point you will figure it out. That's it.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Gino, for taking the time off. I know you're a busy person, but yeah, thank you for taking the time off to join us here at Sparkability. Wish you all the best as you do your work in SM and continue helping social entrepreneurs also. We look forward to working with you again, and thank you. Let's all thank Gino Borromeo for a wonderful talk. And for everyone now, that ends our session for this morning. We will resume for our 5th session this afternoon with At Iba Pa. We will resume at 2 p.m. So until then, thank you and have a great lunch. Bye, guys. Thank you, Gino.